everyone. Welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I have a super smart guru here with me today, and I'm excited because we're going to be talking about podcast editing, speaking at conferences, blogs that support podcasters, lots of great resources today. And Julie's here with me. Julie, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here as a co-host.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. This is a topic I'm really passionate about. So I'm loved that we get to talk about how to podcast.
Beautiful. Yes, perfect. Two podcasters together in one room. What could go wrong, right? Great.
Fun.
Tell everybody where you are and a little bit about you. Love to start off with that.
Absolutely. I am in Kokomo, Indiana, not like the beach song, which every Beach Boys song everyone goes to. Yeah, we're here, Central Indiana. It's storming right now. And my background is in podcasting. I started a podcast in 2019. And then in 2020, took those skills to actually offer podcast services to people on the internet. And here we are, 2023. I've spoken at a couple of conferences and I enjoy it very much.
Amazing. Talk about your business.
Yeah, I started the business podcast editor in the middle of the pandemic. I am a massage therapist by trade and was not able to actually maintain 6 feet of distance at the peak of COVID there that they were really requiring. And so I was like, well, what do I do? You know, what can I do for income? And thought I'd take my hands to the internet and, teach podcast editing and edit people's podcasts and help them figure out, what podcasting is all about. I think a lot of people were learning how to use remote video conferencing tools like Zoom. And they were like, maybe I should start a podcast. And so a lot of people were like, but what does that look like? And I was the person that was able to step in and help them bridge that gap.
Awesome. So what are some things that people should prepare for when they reach out to an editor to have that conversation about working with them? What kind of things would be helpful for you as an editor for a host to come to you with questions or answers that would help start the process of working together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, why do you want a podcast? Many people love the idea of having a podcast because they enjoy having conversations with their friends. And I think there has to be a little bit more deeper thinking in terms of what your plans and purpose are for the podcast, because you will not be able to ride that energy forever.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. What about just like the basics of around the editing process itself? What kind of things do you need to know as an editor from a host so that you're successful helping to edit their show?
Yeah, I also recommend making sure that the music that you're sending your editor is not copywritten. There's plenty of music options that you can choose from that are royalty free, as the industry would like to phrase, right? Like, we want music that's not going to get us any lawsuits. So run that by your editor. If you're not sure, talk to your editor about it, because they can do some quick research and figure out if this is safe music for your podcast.
Amazing. I love your website. It's really great. businesspodcasteditor.com. It's right there. Beautiful website. Lots of great information for podcasters as well. Talk a little bit about your blog and some of your recent blog posts to support podcasters. What are we going to find when we come to your website?
Yeah, I try to stay pretty consistent with my blog. I think if you're consistent with podcasting, it makes it easy to also be consistent on your website, and just, making sure that you're consistently showing up with value and helping other industry professionals. That's my mission. I know, Dave, we had talked about the blog, one of the recent blogs about how expert podcasters are continuing to, improve their podcast. And I'd love to hear your opinion here, because I think there is constant change in the podcast world. Just like on social media, you see trends. And I think that one of the things that podcasters that are successful in is always staying on top of what's popular and what's coming along when it comes to like news and data. We're big data driven nerds. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a beginner podcaster, tracking your analytics is something that we don't emphasize enough with the early podcasters.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that. And I guess the whole thing around AI is another big thing going on in podcasting right now. And I don't know, I love the tools that are available to us. I love that they're out there and that people are creating tools specifically for podcasters. That's great. But I think the one thing that we need to balance all of this great innovation with is the human touch and the personality of the podcaster. We can't lose sight of that in all of these great tools that are out there for us. We need to show up as podcasters and bring our unique personality, our insights, our personal stories to what we do without relying completely on AI to generate content for us. I think that's something that we could easily slide into because it's convenient to go to some program, some AI assistant, and ask them to create our content and then just speak it. That's not really what I really want to see a lot of podcasters do. I want to show up and bring my personality, my story to my show. Are you kind of seeing that in
Absolutely.
your space too?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, again, remembering why you started the podcast,
Right.
right? If you remember why you're starting the podcast, you won't have to depend on tools like AI so much as, what you want to talk about next week. I think that's the same thing. Before AI, you would have a lot of content creators, mimic other industry professionals. And they were just like, I would go mirror them, and that's going to generate influence. And if I'm following, I think AI, people are leaning on that so heavily to be the brain when they have their own brain.
Right. So instead of artificial intelligence, maybe assisted intelligence.
Yeah, strategize with
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, bounce some ideas off, figure out how you can tell your story with more impact. Everyone has a story, and maybe it's just harnessing the different stages in your life where you really made those decisions and you really went through those lessons.
Amazing. From your perspective too, then, is there things that people, maybe newer podcasters, seem to get hung up on with the sound and the feel of their show? And how do you kind of direct them to kind of find their lane, find their groove in their podcast?
Yeah, I think back to the editing question, record on separate tracks.
Yes.
That way, if you do have any audio issues, maybe somebody's coughing while the other person is speaking, you have easy ways to fix that. I would also encourage everyone to stop being so critical. You're in this because you have a mission and you have a passion for what you're doing. Don't fixate so much on if you're cackling in the middle of the podcast because you're having so much fun. The audience loves that. The genuineness of you enjoying yourself is something you can't make up. And in podcasting, listeners really feel that.
They want to connect with you as a host, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we feel like we're hanging out with you in the coffee shop.
Right? Just like this, even in a thunderstorm where you are, like we're hanging out, just doing this and having a great conversation. I think we need to bring, again, more of that to the mic. And when you're a new podcaster, it's really kind of hard because you haven't found your voice yet. So what do you think about practicing before you go to episode 1 and release it to the world? Do you find value in telling people maybe to practice getting used to the microphone and interviewing people before you record your first episode? What do you think of that?
I'll be honest, I'm more of a freedom driven person. I think that if I practiced too much, I would have probably never got started. So
Good
you got to
point.
weigh that one out.
Yeah.
If it's something that would help add some certainty to your life, then by all means, practice away. I will tell you, I'm not somebody that records video because, again, I never felt comfortable even practicing. And the few times that I have done video, I'm like, oh, you just don't look very natural. And with podcasting, it took me a while to get to a place where I even felt comfortable hosting a solo episode. But you get there and you get going. And if you're putting content out regularly and you enjoy it, you're going to grow no matter what. My voice today from even, a month ago, I'm sure has continued to sound better and has continued to add more value.
It's interesting if you've ever struggled with the sound of your own voice and hearing it back and thinking, oh, that's what I sound like? Really? You're like, and then you get comments come back to you from your listeners going, I love your voice. I love that it's soothing, that you're not rushed, that I don't feel anxious as a listener because you're so speaking so fast that you never take a break and you're really talking fast. It's like you just seem to relax, and it feels like I can relax as a listener. I really love your voice. And you're thinking, really? Like, I'm going to put that in my happy folder in my email box of all my folders, because there's times where I struggle and I think, am I really communicating well? Is my voice really clear? Am I doing this right? And I love that feedback. Yeah. Am I going too long with my explanations like this? But I love kind of getting that response from a listener and that they're connecting with you. That's something that I think will really help anybody struggling with their voice and their sound of their voice, because for the most part, growing up, most people haven't like screamed and ran away from us when we spoke in public. So we're pretty well okay, I think, with the voice that we have. You just need to be
Yeah.
comfortable with it and just hit record and get out there.
And, equipment, really. If you have a great mic, your microphone is going to add some depth to your voice that you're like, oh, I sound really cool. Do I really sound like that? At the same time, you're also going to be like, wow, you sound really whiny right now. And that is for sure noticeable because of the mic. And so,
Right.
you'll get used to it. And I think that if you are somebody that, struggles with hearing your voice, be mindful of, at the end of the day, how many people are even thinking, oh, this person's annoying versus how many people are thinking, wow, I'm so glad I heard this message.
Amazing. Talk a little bit about going to conferences and as an attendee and as a speaker, like, wow, that's amazing. Talk a little bit about the value of meeting other podcasters. What's it like for you?
Yeah, I love the podcast community because unlike most communities, I feel like the podcast community is very collaborative. We are very quick to reach out to other podcasters and, hey, can I be on your show? Or, hey, can you be on my show? Or, hey, can we swap a show? And I love that. It's so great in that we all get to meet each other and we all have the same passion around storytelling and, getting to know people beyond just, hey, how are you doing? So a conference like Podfest is really interesting because you're in this room where people are all excited and passionate to learn more things, whether it's a beginner or an expert, but you're also running into these social environments where people are just genuinely excited to meet up and like get to know each other and, hey, how can we work together going forward? And tell me more about your network. And I think that is something that you don't see in many other industries.
Amazing. Talk a little bit about what you spoke on as a speaker. That's another level altogether. That's a great opportunity for you. How did that all happen, and what was your topic?
I applied to speak at Podfest, and yeah, the topic that I spoke on was around audience growth. I really am passionate about audience growth and how people can utilize social media to really grow their audience and engage in the community to find new listeners. A lot of people use social media to post their podcast, but social media beyond posting is, an interactive platform, just like podcasting. And so I think if you go through and engage and find people that would align with something that you're sharing in your podcast, you've got to be strategic with it. And I've really mastered how to use platforms like Instagram to create a lead funnel for finding new people to be on your podcast and to listen to your podcast.
Okay, so you got to give us a tip. There's got to be a freebie here for everyone from your talk and your experience. What can we do this week for our podcast?
So if you know who your target audience is, who is listening to your podcast, you can create what they call a buyer journey. And what that looks like is, I call it a listener journey in the podcast world, because if you can picture who your listener is and what they're doing on a Saturday morning as they're scrolling through Instagram, you could probably find the pools of areas where your listener is hanging out. So if you're, for example, having a coffee podcast and you wanted to find people that are into coffee, you could start searching the different coffee shops in your area and see who's tagging that coffee shop and follow them on Instagram and just send them a quick message or comment on their post saying, hey, do you love coffee? I have this really cool podcast where we talk about cool coffee shops like this one. You should check it out sometime.
Wow, that's a great tip. I love that. That's amazing. You have to show up in your community. I think that's a big thing. And I like to tell everybody, Julie, that we need to put social back in social media. We really got to get beyond just a like and a heart and a thumbs up and get to like meeting each other and having conversation. One little trick that I've been promoting to my guests that have Instagram accounts is pick 5 of your most recent followers and go send them a voice message, especially if you're a podcaster, because people love to hear your voice. You're the host of the show. And it's something that you can't do en masse. You can't give this to someone else to do for you as an assistant. It's something you can't do in bulk. You have to do this one at a time. It takes a few minutes, but you just go into their DMs, hit the record button, and leave them a voice message, thanking them for following you on Instagram or whatever, just being kind and nice to your new followers, welcoming them to your Instagram page. Like that is, no one can avoid clicking a play button. It's like, because it's so different. So hitting that play button is like, they gave me a message just for me. That is amazing. The other thing you can do is just on your newest episode, just call out. I want to just say hi to my few of my new followers over on Instagram. This is where you can find me, by the way. And I just want to say hi to Stacy, Kathy, and Bob. Thank you guys for checking out my Instagram page. Love having you part of the community. And if you want to follow me, here I am at this place. And it's like they got to hear their name on the podcast. It's like, wow, that's really kind of cool and interactive.
That is awesome. I like that. And, to your point about leaving voice memos, I always encourage people to leave voice memos. And I think it's awesome too, because of the individualized effort that you're putting in.
Right.
But when you post on your Instagram stories, you can see who's viewing your stories. You can see who's liking your stories. So if you promoted a podcast episode, how cool is it to directly send somebody a message saying, hey, thanks so much for, following the post. So thanks so much for liking the post. But beyond that, sending them a direct link to the episode. Like, hey, I noticed you checked this out. Just for your convenience, I wanted to reach out and send you this link. So that way they don't have to go through, remember, oh yeah, I wanted to check that out. They've got this message now pop up that's like, oh, she sent me a message with a direct link to the episode.
Right.
That is so thoughtful.
And that's kind of a parenting hack, right? You want to encourage good behavior. When your children do something good, you praise them. And they're like, oh, that was good. I'll do more of that. Same with your followers on social media. When you see them interacting, encourage good behavior by rewarding it with reaction from you as the host. And I just think if we can balance creating content, recording our episodes, editing, or giving you our podcast to edit, and all of that work that we have to do, I think sometimes we forget about those who are really interacting with us. And I just did an episode recently talking about what's more important as podcasters, getting a new listener or keeping a listener. And I kind of think we need to do both. We need to retain our listeners by lowering the barrier of entry into our world, into our podcast, make it really easy for people to find us, but then raise the barrier to exit by giving great content to keep people here. We don't want them to come in the front door as a listener and then leave and never come back. We want to keep them once we get them. So how do we make it easy for them to find us? And how do we keep them from leaving without, making that sound like we're keeping them, right? We want to just give them great content.
Right. And beyond, great content, it has to be meaningful, right? We don't want content that is curated by AI and is systematically telling us, this is what we're going to talk about every week, because it changes and the world changes and life changes. And Dave, I'm curious, what's something you've been doing to keep your audience from leaving you?
Wow. Well, one of the things I like for this podcast is I have the little speak pipe icon on my website. So anytime I get a message from a listener, I bring it into my show. So they get to hear their voice in my podcast. It could be a question, a comment, a suggestion, whatever. And I like to encourage them to shout out their show at the same time. So they get free promotion for their podcast, which is great because they get to be in front of different ears that they're not normally in front of by being on my show, just by leaving me a message. And I had a really great example of this. Rachel, who's probably listening. Hi, Rachel. She's in Australia. She left me a message. And I love when you can put a name to your listener, right? That feels good. Rachel was listening to the show. She left me a voice message. I brought her message into the show. I answered her question or her comment and included her in the podcast. She responded with another voice message saying, that was so amazing. I just heard my voice on your show. I am so excited. Who does that? So I took that one step further. And Julie, what I did is I created a short episode where I took her trailer for her show and I brought it into my podcast. I did a whole episode about her and her podcast, played her trailer, and I did it as a bonus episode outside of my numbered episodes, created an episode just for her, put it up right away and tagged her in it. And she got her own bonus episode. She responded. She was kind of laughing and a little bit of crying that someone would do something like that for her just because she reached out. And what's happening is people are responding now because and I put it out there, Julie, if you leave me a message, I'm going to include you in my podcast. I want to promote you. And it's a little bit of, will he really do that? Or is he just saying it?
Right.
But when they hear the results, they're like, Yeah, it just sort of spawns more people to go, well, I want to be promoted. I want people to hear about my show. So I'm going to
Right.
reach out to Dave.
And so this is the first episode you've ever heard of the How to podcast. Go leave your voice memos right now.
Do it right now. Flood me. Make it really hard. And there's actually another woman in Georgia that her name is Whitney, and she did the same thing. She heard my podcast, and episode after episode, she kept hearing me ask for people to reach out, and she's like, "Right, he's probably not going to respond." So she did. She left me a voice message, and the same day I responded back to her, and she's like, "It's true. Like it's beyond like that whole mystery about who is this person as a host? Will they really interact? Are they just saying these things? Do they really mean it?" I think once you prove through your actions as a host that you really do care about your audience, that will open the door for more of that to come. It takes time, but I think you can do it.
Wow. I love that.
How about for you? Any examples from your side about how you do that?
Ours is more in person community, speaking at our podcast is invited to events. So we will be speaking at Global Leadership Summit next week, where we've just been invited to hang out for 2 days in the foyer as people are attending the summit. They will stop and either interview or check out the podcast. And then the following week, the shows go live and there are mini series. So we'll probably do, 10 to 12 interviews over the course of 2 days, and they'll launch out every week following the summit. And then we will be doing another event in the fall, and in person being at some of these business and leadership conferences. It's just become almost like a staple to have the podcast girls come and have podcasting going on
Nice.
in our city.
Wow. That's amazing. So I love that as a compliment to going to podcast themed events where you meet other podcasters. Balance that out with going to events that are in your genre, what you're talking about, and show up there and be the voice of that event. So if you
have a gaming conference coming into town, go reach out to the event coordinator and see if you can host your own podcast table at the conference and invite people attending the conference to be a guest on your podcast.
Interview the gamers, the people that are speaking, the
other vendors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There could be commercial opportunities for you to have sponsors.
Concerts. I think another great secret that a lot of people are unaware of is you can get a free press pass at many of these events because they love having podcasters there, somebody there to interview. You're no different than a radio show.
Right. With a global audience.
Global. International.
And your podcast lives on past a moment in time on radio that if you're not there, you missed it. Podcasting, right. It lives and lives and lives. So
exactly.
Step up. Those are great opportunities for you as a podcast host.
Fans love to be interviewed on podcasts. Businesses love to be interviewed on podcasts. Yes. People love to be on podcasts.
Right. And here we are doing this together. That's exactly it.
And it's flattering. You go to the event and you're reaching out to them and you're like, can I host my podcast here? They're like, yes.
I love it. That's a great tip. Talk a little bit about how we can improve our podcast. That's another one of your blog posts that I found on your website. Is there any tips on how we can improve and get better as podcasters?
I think, looking back at analytics is really important. Being able to see what episodes performed the best, which ones didn't perform the best, and why, understanding why is really important for keeping your audience. Because if you're just running episodes that nobody really cares, maybe my solo episodes, no one's listening, and I should just really consider that that's not my talent. Take an analysis of what's going on, but also stay on top of market trends, stay on top of what other podcasters are doing, because if you're not growing and learning, you're just going to stay the same, and that's going to get boring too.
Right. There's a lot to learn from out there. And I encourage all the podcasters that I talk to listen to podcasts in your area of expertise, what you're talking about. It's a great way to get some insight. Maybe you'll hear about a great guest that might be interested in coming on your show because they're on a show similar to yours. It just helps you to expand your knowledge. We only know what we know. So the more we can bring into our work stream and into our knowledge and our content, the better our podcast will be as well. So don't be afraid to listen to other shows and learn from other people. One thing I love too for an interview podcast is I actually put this in front of somebody as a test. I said, go find a topic you know nothing about and you have zero interest in. So it could be hamster making clothes for hamsters. I don't know. I have no interest in that podcast. I have no interest in the topic, but listen to the host and listen to their interview skills, because you're not going to get caught up in the content and forget to listen. You're going to listen to how they do their interview and pick up the good things and put away the things that you don't like, but learn from how people interview and take those to your own podcast, because you're not caught up in the content. You're not going to get dizzy by that. You can just focus in on, how are they asking questions? Do I like this podcast? What am I learning about the host and the guest by listening to this content? Because I'm not interested in what they're talking about. And then dissect it from that point of view and learn and grow and bring what you can use back to your podcast.
That's an awesome tip. Yeah, for sure. And don't stop doing that, because you don't ever want to get in a cycle where you don't listen to podcasts or, just don't do research. You're going to want to stay on top of those things. You get stuck in a pattern where you're like asking the same questions all the time. And it sounds like, okay, like she's been asking the same people these same questions. Like, you've got to figure out something deeper. They call it deeper conversation skills, right? Your interview skills can always be improved.
Right. Any tips from your perspective on how we can get better at doing our interviews?
Yeah. Beyond listening to more podcasts, I think doing more interviews, I can tell when I haven't been doing interviews and it's maybe just been repurposing old episodes or just solo episodes. As soon as I get back into interviewing, I'm like, oh yeah, active listening skills, turn them back on. Oh, there you go. Active listening. That's a great tip. Maybe don't be scrolling on your thumb, on your phone while they're talking and not listening to what they actually have to say, or sometimes you're daydreaming or you're focused on the next question. Take that time to really listen to what your guest has to say, because you will be surprised at, what kind of questions will come up through their responses. We get so focused on the script questions that we have listed out that we want to hit that we forget that you don't have to be locked into such a box. You can let the conversation go a different route.
And acknowledging your guest in their answers, where if I do have a list of 10 questions and I'm reading them to you from my clipboard here, 1 question, 2 question 3, it's like, I'm not even listening to you as a guest, and the guest gives you an amazing story. And that's when the car flipped over and everything happened and it was just amazing. And they're like, and question number 3.
Yeah, so where can our guests find you?
Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. All your listeners are like, wait. We want to know more about that. Go back to that. Right. So listen, engage, and be a part of your guest experience as well. I think that's really a good tip. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about, just from your perspective then, where do you see podcasts going in the future? What's exciting that you see is coming down the horizon? Anything that's really interesting to you in the future?
I love this question because outside of the podcast world, my regular friends and family think that podcasting is silly and they think it's dying. Really? They are not sure why I even do this. And I think, my dad's still like, so where do I find you on YouTube? So I think the future of podcasting is only going to continue to boom.
Good.
I think that we are still in the infancy of seeing how podcasting is going to really work for businesses long term, because as our buyers are looking for more connection and more trust, they're not really focused on social media posts anymore. And they're not really, it's all becoming too noisy. So they're looking for genuine ways to connect with their consumers, and podcasting is definitely going to be that method. Spotify is really blazing the trail for content creators and especially podcasters, because you are seeing that they've bought Anchor.
Yep.
You're seeing that, they're improving how podcasters get their shows distributed. You're seeing how listeners are getting easier access to different shows that they might be interested in. I think that Spotify is more alive than ever, and podcasting is only going to continue to gain popularity. And I don't think that podcasting is dying anytime soon.
I love it. Good. That's good to hear. That's exactly what I'm thinking. And I think that there was a surge of people podcasting during the pandemic. And for some reason, some of those people have now abandoned their podcasts, which means there's space. So if you're thinking that the space is crowded and there's not enough room for you to do a show, there's a lot of inactive shows unfortunately, that are really good shows. They're just not producing episodes anymore. You're not really competing with them because you can create a new show and get out there and share your message. There's a lot of room for everyone. So if you think you're too late to the party, you're not. Please start your show.
Right, right. And, I remind everybody about Threads, right? Everyone was in Threads in one day and it didn't deter anybody. So if you're really feeling that intimidated, trust that even if all those shows decide they want to start back up, you are still a small percentage of people that are doing what you're doing.
Right. Any podcasting tools that you love right now that that maybe some people aren't using, that you're like, why are not people using this tool? It's really good. I love it. What are you using?
2, Auphonic.
Yes.
I love because you don't have to worry about leveling your own sound. And the second one is Descript because it will remove your filler words seamlessly. Early in my editing stage, I was just removing every single gap and every single filler word and every single everything. And it didn't sound like people were even breathing on the podcast.
Yeah.
But now, thankfully for tools like Descript, I can just have AI remove the filler words on my behalf, and that saves me a lot of time.
Amazing. One of the ones I like right now is to get a shareable link to your podcast that you can put in your email signature, on your website, wherever on social media, is pod.link, pod.link.
Nice.
Search up your podcast there, and it'll give you a clickable link to your show, which has all of your icons for all your listening apps. Your most recent episodes are listed right there. How to contact you, everything's right there. It's all free. And it's an amazing little resource. So pod.link. And I use it in my email signatures. Like I said, if I'm going to send out a link to my guests to the podcast, it has every possible app that I'm on. And you can click right from there and go to Apple and Spotify and Audible, wherever, all for free. It's really cool. And all you have to do is search up the name of your podcast. It's a really cool tool. I don't think a lot of people are using it, but I love it. It's really easy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because all that made me think about was if you don't have a website for your podcast, go to podpage.com and they can put together a website for you in minutes for your podcast.
Yeah, unfortunately, Podpage is now going to a paid model, and I liked it as a free resource. I understand why they're doing it, but Podlink is still a free option too. Then, if you want something that you can't afford to put money out for, it just gives you a really easy way to communicate with your audience. I like them in stickers on Instagram, one of my stories. You can do that clickable link sticker right on your post. Put your pod link there, and people can click it, and they get everything. They don't just get Apple. They don't just get Spotify. They get everything. And they can choose what they want to use.
That's great. That is great. And, we didn't talk about monetization, but hearing that, Podpage is moving to more of a subscription base made me think about how podcasters that are not currently monetizing should really consider a paywall feature for exclusive content. And I think that marketing is really heading in that direction. It makes your listener feel like there's that extra white glove touch. So if you are looking to build a community of loyal listeners, I really recommend considering and looking into a exclusive subscription membership for your podcast listeners.
Smart. A couple of that maybe with as many options as possible to make it easy for your listeners to support you. I have that buy me a coffee thing, for example. It's just sits on my website. Somebody bought me 10 coffees last week. I'm like, what the heck? This is amazing.
Yes.
Thank you. Like that just came out of nowhere. So make it easy for people to find you and support you and let them know. I think that's the one thing that we assume that people know that this costs money to do, to hire a great editor to help us, to have a website, to have our hosting sites. They just assume that everything's fine because we've never said anything. And just let them know, listen, hey, I have a young family, I'm working full time, and I'm doing this for you. But just so you know, it does cost me about $30 a month to do the podcast. I just want to let you know that anything you can do to help would be so great, because then I can take my kids to the restaurant, or I could buy them some toys, or back to school time, right? I have expenses above and beyond the podcast. And if you can help me, diapers. If you can help me, instead of buy me a coffee, maybe it's buy me a diaper. I don't know. But you could do something like that your audience can go, wait a minute, I didn't realize that Julie needed help. I just assumed that she was fine, but I can help. $5, that's nothing. I can do that right today. So make it easy for people to support you as well.
I love that. That is a great tip.
See, I love it. Okay, so thank you for being here, Julie. I love having you on. Again, if somebody wants to get podcast editing support from you, they hit record, they're done with their recording, and they just give it to you. Is that kind of how it works? And you take care of everything?
Yep. And they'll want to send a music file also if they want music in their podcast. And if they want any clips cut out of that, I usually will help with that also. So they can, I think the best next step is to send me an email or go to the website and book a free call. And I call them coffee chats. So we can have a free virtual coffee and hang out and just kind of come up with a plan for your podcast and how you want to tackle those services.
Amazing. Roughly how many podcasts are you working on right now currently?
Yep. So usually I keep it around 10 to 15.
Wow.
Some drop off in the summer. I'm kind of in a weird transition where, some of the podcasts that I manage are on strike.
Wow,
and
that's
so,
true. Yeah.
Yeah, the entertainment industry is kind of interesting right now. But 12 is about what I'm averaging right now at the moment.
That's amazing. That's awesome. So beyond the editing, what other services do you have?
Yeah, usually it's setting them up, distribution, show notes. I do offer audiograms. And some people will hit me up for podcast blogs. So it would just turn the basically show notes and enhance them.
Good. Awesome. Any thoughts around transcriptions?
Oh yeah, I do transcriptions also, but it's just mostly for pulling quotes out for clients. I don't know if they actually go through and look at the transcriptions or use them, but I use them to, again, pull quotes out.
Good. Awesome. I love it. So a great resource, everyone, to reach out, get Julie, get her on your side, and she can help you and walk you through all of this. It's great. And I love that you have a free call as well. That's good.
Yeah. Descript is the transcription tool I use in addition to removing the filler words. So if you're checking out Descript, get in there.
Good. Awesome. Great. Even if you have questions about Descript, reach out to Julie and she can help you with that as well.
Love that. Thank you, Dave.
Awesome. So you can come back anytime you want, by the way. I love having you here and you bring a great insight, great experience. And you're a speaker at PodFest, like that's a big deal. So thank you for making time to be on the show and co-hosting with me today. It's great.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back. This has been a lot of fun. And anytime I get to share, I'm happy to do it. I love this community very much.
Okay. So come back in the future. Would love to. Send everybody to your website. Where do we go? How do we do it?
Yep. thebusinesspodcasteditor.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Indie Mompreneur.
Beautiful. We'll have links in the show notes as always. And if you want to buy Julia coffee, I'm sure she'd be fine with that. So, or diapers, thanks, Julie, for being part of the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.